Well, we're still waiting this afternoon for the start of the court hearing in the child negligence matter against the paternal grandparents of a missing 2-year-old in Limpopo. Umphile Sithole has not been seen since the beginning of this month. The matter now currently delayed. That's the hearing at the Mahwili Ring Magistrates Court in Limpopo. Police are yet to finalize 2 statements, we understand, from an investigating officer and a facilitator at a local care center where Umphile was before she disappeared. Some background: grandparents are aged 52 and 55. They were arrested this past weekend after a confirmation from police that they were now going to be charged with negligence in relation to this child's disappearance. Let's take this issue further. Bring into the conversation Dr. Shaheda Omar, who's director at the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children, and Gugu Kaba, CEO of Save the Children South Africa. My thanks to you both. Appreciate your time. Dr. Omar, let me start with you. Give me your reading first of the facts on the table regarding little Umphile's disappearance at this stage.
Well, I think if we just look at this case of Umphile, the missing 2-year-old child whose grandparents are now reportedly being arrested for child neglect, and I think the reality is that we have started Child Protection Month, and Child Protection is a 365-day campaign. These stories should not simply shock the nation for a few news cycles. They must force us to confront the daily realities many children live with behind closed doors. I think children are entitled, it's not even a think, it's an absolute right that children are entitled to care, protection, supervision, dignity, and safety. A 2-year-old is entirely dependent on adults for survival and protection. Any lapse in supervision can place a child at immediate risk of harm, exploitation, trafficking, injury, or death. And the younger the child, the greater the duty of care is required from adults and caretakers, I think. So this is a huge, huge concern that children are subjected to this level of harm and exploitation and violation.
And Gugu, we're waiting to see the court hear this case against the grandparents, hopefully sometime soon today. But what we know at this stage is that Umphile was home with her grandparents that had been sleeping in the same house. And then they say when they woke up in the morning, the child was gone, a bedroom window was open. No one seems to have any idea where she could have gone. At what point does the parent or guardian of a child generally become responsible as far as negligent behavior is concerned?
Thank you very much for the question. As Save the Children South Africa, our view is that the law or justice must investigate what has happened. Because what we know now is that a window was open, the child was missing, and no one can confirm if they contributed to the disappearance of the child. So what's important right now is an investigation to be done in order to establish what could have happened. We can look at where, issues before the child disappeared or after, and confirm the truth about what they are saying before we can even accuse them. But given the fact that it seems to have happened at night, it means we as justice have a case to investigate for before we can accuse them. And I'm sure the police have some information. That is why they were able to arrest them. But they are fully responsible, as Dr. Omar has indicated. Thank you.
Back to you then, Dr. Omar. Is it possible for a parent or guardian to be found to have been negligent through a court process, even if they weren't ultimately responsible for, let's say, as is suspected in this case, the abduction of little Umphile?
So I think I just want to express this. Child neglect is a serious form of abuse, and often there's a misconception that abuse only refers to physical or sexual abuse. Neglect is one of the most common and dangerous forms of child maltreatment in South Africa. Neglect can include failure to adequately supervise a child, lack of access to food, healthcare, or education, unsafe living conditions, the emotional unavailability, and failure to protect children from foreseeable harm. So if we just look here at this whole situation, there's purposeful neglect and there's situational neglect, where the one is intentional, one is not intentional, but you refer to the statutory process, you refer to court processes, and I think it is important, like my learned colleague alluded to earlier on, that a thorough investigation needs to be conducted. And in cases where children are found to be neglected or which constitutes or tantamounts to abuse, where children are still in that environment, the rapid risk assessment means that the child would have to be removed from that context until a thorough investigation is conducted. So even, following the court processes, the forensic investigation, etc., it would require that it is conducted with absolute rigor, ensuring that the child was violated and that it was purposeful, it was intentional, and that the child has been subjected to harm. I think that is important to establish. So, of course, it requires statutory workers, it requires the Family Violence, Child Protection, Sexual Offences Unit, but it requires a collective effort of the interdisciplinary, intersectoral stakeholders to establish this and to look at a way of action or a plan of action moving forward.
But there is a troubling thread, Dr. Omar, that's emerging, at least in this case, because in the last 24 hours or so, Umpile's mother has basically given interviews or an interview. And in that interview, she basically says that she does not believe that the grandparents, the paternal grandparents, it must be said, have been entirely truthful with police regarding what happened on the night that this child disappeared. How much does that complicate this case, and what is the appropriate way, let me say, Dr. Omar, of then continuing with the investigation when you now consider that there's ultimately what the mother is saying, which exposes a rift that is either new or had already been there in the family?
Well, again, as we mentioned earlier, I think both my learned colleagues mentioned from the fact that a proper due diligence needs to be followed through, because there might be ulterior motives here, there might be altercations, family conflict, and one needs to look at the intention, the motive, and looking at it in context and ensuring that it is followed through with thorough investigation. So recognizing, reporting, where the children's court or even law enforcement follows through with prosecutions. I think we cannot just take at face value what the mother is saying or what the grandparents have said. We have to establish and look at the whole context before any decisions can be made. So it's got to be done in an objective, neutral manner without any bias or prejudices. So it's got to be without any prejudices, but ensuring that it is thorough.
And lastly, Kukugaba, let me come back to you, ma'am, and talk about the importance of time. Umpile has not been seen since the beginning of this month. We're now on the 18th of May. How important is the passage of time in the case where a child is missing?
It's extremely important. Look, within 48 hours, if a child is missing, we have a serious problem. Such that as we are talking, I was thinking, what else besides arresting these grandparents have the police done? What information do we have, even before what the mother is saying? Because as soon as the child was missing, there was a need to question the grandparents and the mother, and also look in the surrounding areas where the child could be, including the Early Childhood Development Center they are talking about. So looking, investigating, questioning, even neighbors and everybody else would have given us more information. We've lost a lot of time right now. So it's seriously suspect as to where this child could be, but then we don't stop looking, because in the best interest of this child, we need to make sure that we do a thorough job until this child can be found. And of course, we've got people who need to talk and explain what could have happened. A 2-year-old would sleep with the grandparents. Where were they when the child disappeared? Thank you.
Good to have your time, Kukuklaba. Thank you very much. That's the CEO of Save the Children South Africa, and Dr. Shaheda Omar, who is the director at Teddy Bear Clinic. Thank you both for your time.